This is William Robinson of ViralHair.com. We're talking to Mr. Bob Anderson, who is currently on tour presenting a Frank Sinatra tribute.
That's right. It's called Frank the Man, the Music, and it's a theatrical production. It's a reenactment of an evening of Frank Sinatra at Caesar's Palace in 1968. And I wrote the show so that the music that golden age of music that he belonged to, it just has to keep going. Somebody's got to keep that music going, and I'm one of the contributors that's trying to do that. It's a chance for the younger generation to leave their high-tech world behind, travel back in time to circa 1968, and see what the entertainment business used to be like, how it used to be, and when you're seeing it Frank Sinatra on stage for an hour and a half.
Oh, awesome.
And that's what we're doing. I use 32 musicians with me. I have his original arrangements that were given to me from him by people that write the arrangements, the music that the musicians play. They're all written by Nelson Riddle and Don Costa and Billy May and Johnny Mandel, and all of them. I have all those. Sinatra's name is on all of them. They were given to me, all of them, 65 of them.
Wow, that's
I started off
impressive.
with Nancy Sinatra, the daughter, and she started me in the business.
That's great. And I understand you've done celebrity impressions from, along with Frank Sinatra, to Dean Martin and others.
Yes.
What made you choose Frank Sinatra to focus on for this show?
Well, okay, I started off doing, you got a lot going on here in this place, man. It's fine. I don't care. It's up to you. I started off doing all the great singers, of the Great American Songbook.
Right.
And that takes in, like, I'm talking about the people from that pop period, that like Sammy, Dean, and Frank, but Tony Bennett.
Right.
Andy Williams, Johnny Mathis, Bobby Darin, Mel Torme, Vic Damone, Nat King Cole, all those guys.
Right.
Well, I started doing all those people. Merv Griffin wrote my act. Remember Merv?
Yes, sir. I do.
Yeah. Well, Merv was a great guy. He wrote my act for me. I wasn't doing impressions in my life. I wasn't even doing them. And he invited me to a party at his home one night. I was just singing. I was just a regular singer. I was singing. And Nancy Sinatra brought me on his TV show, introduced me to him. So he asked me, would you like to sing something? So I sang something, but I wasn't doing any impressions. So about, half a year later, when I saw him after doing 2 shows, I was working with Joan Rivers at a club in Beverly Hills called the E Little Club. And he came in and invited me to his 50th birthday party in Hollywood. So I go there. And I walk in, and all of Hollywood was there. I mean, everybody. Cary Grant, Henry Fonda, Jimmy Stewart, the Beach Boys, Goldie Hawn. Everybody was at this party. It's Merv Griffin.
Right.
He was Mr. Hollywood. That's what he was. He was it. So he starts playing the piano in his house. And there's probably 200 people there. And he asked me to come up and sing. And out of nowhere, he starts playing Misty, and I turned into Johnny Mathis. I started doing Johnny Mathis. Then I started doing Tony Bennett, and I was doing Tony Bennett and Sammy Davis Jr., man. I want to be with you. I'm doing all this stuff. And that was Tony Bennett and all the great characters. And Cary Grant was sitting on the floor next to me. And Cary Grant's sitting there leaning next to the piano, and he says, well, this is really something. Because I've never seen anything like this. So Merv Griffin, Robert Goulet is standing in the back of the room, leaned up against the wall, and he says, can you do me, kid? Just like this. And so I went into, if ever I would leave you, and I went into Robert Goulet. So I did Goulet. So Griffin said, we found your act. You're going to be the singing impressionist. He was telling me, Bob, when Nancy Sinatra brought me on the show, I had to have a reason for being on these shows. I just couldn't come on there. I either had to have a hit record or be in the movies or write a book or something. You got to have a reason for being on the show. I didn't have a reason. He says, you have one now. You're going to be the singing impressionist. So when Merv Griffin wrote that, he wrote my whole act for me. And then he brought me back to Caesar's Palace on the following Friday when he was taping a show from there. And he said, "Oh, those great stars are wrapped up in this next young man that's about to come out here. He's known as a singing impressionist." So I became the very first impressionist to ever introduce. They were always doing, impressionists were doing actors or political figures, but nobody was doing the great singers. So I was the first guy to do that. And I was the first guy to, now everybody does it, and they're called tribute singers. And I was the first tribute singer in the business. And I started that whole genre. And so I started doing all of those great artists from that period, but I found out today, after working the Strip for 31 years in Las Vegas, everything has changed in the music business so drastically today that all of those wonderful artists are not relevant in today's world. It's unfortunate.
Yes,
You know, the only guy that is Frank Sinatra. He transcends every generation. He's as popular today as he ever was. There's nobody in this bar here that doesn't know who he is. Every single night, when you pack this place here, everybody knows who Frank Sinatra is. You can't go on an airplane, and I'll lay you 10 to 1 odds, $1,000 to $100, that if you walk on an airplane and you go to every seat, every person in the plane knows who Frank Sinatra is. That's it. He's as popular today as he ever was.
Why do you think that is? Why is, out of so many of those, like you said, singers from that era, Frank Sinatra still resonates with future generations so much?
Because what he had was more than, well, first of all, he is in a league of his own, almost that way, in what he does as a singer. And everybody respected him, and everybody knows in our industry what a great artist he really was as a singer. That's why today, all of the rock and roll stars, from Bob Dylan
Right.
to Rod Stewart, to Paul McCartney, to all these people have done, all the way down to people in the business today like Bublé and all these people. They've all done their tributes to Frank Sinatra. They put all the records out of Frank Sinatra's music, all of them.
Right.
Even Bob Dylan, all of them are doing. They all respected him and called him the chairman of the board because he was just simply that. He was just a step ahead of everybody. And in many cases, he was a mile ahead of most people.
Right.
But his singing was absolutely to perfection. Somebody said in 1957, Frank Sinatra hit a flat note, and then he never hit another one when they told him. And I mean, that's the way he was. But it wasn't only that, it was his persona.
Right.
His personality. The fact that he was an actor, and the way he acted, and all of these, not only was he the greatest singer, here's a thing to try. You can put Frank Sinatra's music on at your home and put it on at 7 o'clock in the morning in the background. Nice, wake up and call me irresponsible, and it's just really floating along. Or when I was 17, it was a very good year. All this stuff you can be playing. At midnight, at night, that can still be playing over there, and you're not sick of it. He's the only artist that can do that. Try that with Barbra Streisand. You can't do it. You get one side, you won't even finish a half a side with her. But I mean, when you do that, you can't play one guy's music over and over. You get tired of it. You switch it. You don't switch Frank Sinatra's. You leave it on, and you're never tired of it. It's there, and you're listening. He was just that unique, and he was that good. But then again, he was an actor as well. I mean, he won the Oscar, From Here to Eternity. But like what we were talking before, as you talked about Man with the Golden Arm and The Manchurian Candidate.
Right.
And I mean, he made some Von Ryan's Express. He made some very, very good movies.
And he wasn't afraid to keep pushing himself when he did a role either.
He what, Tom?
Wasn't afraid to push himself when he did a role either.
No, absolutely. He was never afraid to push himself anywhere.
Right.
And that's, I mean, he was a very aggressive guy. I mean, he was like that. I got to know him, and I've done a few shows with him. He and I did a show together at the Waldorf in New York for Henry Kissinger when they were honoring Henry Kissinger at the time of the most important living diplomat in the world. And Peter Nero, the piano player, Lou Rawls, Frank Sinatra, and myself did the show for him. And then I did a show with Sinatra at the Dunes Hotel in Las Vegas for the governor. And his daughter, as I told you before, Nancy, started me in the business. And it was just the first time I met him was she was moving her house off of Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles. And Daddy bought her another house downstairs, down the street, behind the Beverly Hills Hotel. And so she was moving, and she says to me, I want you to help me. I'm moving. I want you to help me move. I said, help you move? You're Frank, you're Sinatra daughter. We may help you move. Get somebody to do it. Can't you afford that? She says, no. She says, I don't want certain people touching certain things. Okay, I'm going to keep this privately. I don't want them to just move that. There's certain stuff we have to take ourselves back.
Right.
So I picked up this picture in the house, okay. Now, this started at 6 in the morning. We started moving. Nobody was in our house. It was plain. It was blank. It was an open. She was going to move in, but there was nothing there. And when I got there, her mother, Nancy Sr., was cooking sauce on the stove, and it was like a family just coming in. They're going to move into a new house,
Right.
And so I happened to be there, and so we were walking up and down, driving up and down the hill, and I picked up a picture of them. I could see why she wouldn't want me to touch it. It was a picture of Elvis Presley in the swimming pool with Nancy on his shoulders, okay, and Frank Sinatra in the pool with Frank Jr. on his shoulders, and they were doing horse fights in the pool. Elvis Presley was a very, very close friend of the Sinatra family.
Right.
And so when I moved stuff, and the third time we came down, we sat down, and they had the kitchen table already brought in and stuff. And her mother says, come on, let's sit down and eat. And as soon as she said that, Frank Sinatra come walking around the corner. He was in white Gucci loafers, white shorts, an LA Dodgers baseball hat. And that was the first time I met him. And he went to the stove, and he served us all the pasta and the salad, and the four of us. It was Nancy Jr., Nancy, his daughter, Frank Jr., his mother, the mother, Nancy, Frank, and myself. And I just got to eavesdrop, and I just happened to be there with a family moving into a new house, and I sat there with them for a few hours. And but then we became, not longtime friends, but associates. Like if he saw me and I walked into a place, he'd say, Bob, come here, sit down. He came to my shows at 3 different times at the Tavern on the Green in New York and at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. He and Dean Martin came into my show. And so I just got to know him, and I knew that he's the only one that is relative in today's world of music.
Right. Now,
and people, here's one more thing I'm going to tell you. People, when I tell them, when we do interviews like this, I said, he was the most famous artist that ever lived. And somebody will come back to me and say, wait a minute, what about Michael Jackson? I'll say, Michael Jackson was dead at 51 years old. Okay, and say, well, what about Elvis? He was dead at 42. Frank Sinatra performed till he was 83. And he's as popular in the foreign countries as he is over here.
right.
Everywhere, from Russia right through to Brazil. I mean, he's that popular. So I'm doing him now. And when I was at the Venetian, we just closed at the Venetian. We were there for a year at the Venetian Palazzo. When you were buying a ticket, on the back of my ticket, I had a voluntary thing that you could put a check mark next to. Are you under 35? Are you under 50? Are you over 65? 1/3 of my audience was under 35 years old at the Venetian for a whole year. Because they liked that. He was that good.
Right.
They want to see what that was about.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And another question, kind of in the same field, because you talked about other impressions of actors and that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
I know some of those guys have asked to do like voiceovers or fill-ins for different types of roles. Have you been asked to do that kind of thing?
Yes.
For?
As a matter of fact, I did the life story of Sammy Davis Jr. with Dwight Smith and Gary Hemian. Gary Smith, Dwight Hemian, Smith Hemian. I did it tells the story of his life, and I am the commentator telling the whole story. I tell the whole story about Sammy Davis, and I'm him, my voice of Sammy. I did his whole deal. And I've done Ray Charles before, too, and I've done a number of different people.
Right. What so far has been your favorite fan reaction and what you've been doing?
My favorite what?
Fan reaction.
Fan reaction?
Whether it be your average person or celebrity, but somebody who's it was something you remember more than others.
Well, Tony Bennett, when he was sitting in the audience, came up to me right after the show, and he said, he said, you had me the second you walked on stage, and you kept me through the whole thing. But he said what you did is you walked off the stage, and nobody knew your name. He said, nobody knew your name. Nobody knew your name. You can't do that. He said, you got to go, and, at the end, here's what I want you to do. He said, you walked on as Sinatra, you left as Sinatra. That's great, but they got to know who you are. So he said, I want you to undo your tie at the end of the show. Come back, turn around the audience and say, there'll never be another Frank Sinatra. And my name is Bob Anderson, folks. And I hope you enjoyed the show. I tried to do the best I could for you. And if you don't mind, I'm going to end this show as myself, as a tribute from me to this great star who made me the singer that I am today. And I close with My Way. He said it'll get the best response of the show. And he was right. So Tony Bennett he went back and wrote it all out. He wrote the whole ending of my whole show. So that's where we are. And that's really the way to leave this on a good note,
That's
Tony Bennett, he's the best.
He is. Very awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Anderson.
You're so welcome. Thank you for your time.